Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 12, 2015 Board of Education meeting. We'll start off the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With the permission of the board, we will move up to this point in the agenda, item 4, which is a legislative update. We, by tradition, ask our state representatives and state senator to attend the first meeting of every calendar year to tell us what we can expect from Hartford and what we shouldn't expect maybe from Hartford as well. This is going to be the first meeting in many, many years that Senator Meyer will not be with us and Representative Widlitz will not be with us. That means that Representative Candelora of North Branford and North Guilford is now the senior member of our delegation. So we are delighted that you could be here with us. Also Senator Ted Kennedy and Representative Sean Scanlon. So I want to thank all of you for taking the time. I know the session is started, so it's a little bit busy, I'm sure, in Hartford, but maybe Representative Candelora, you could start and just give us your take on where we are.
Sure. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. As Mr. Bloss pointed out, my name is Vinnie Candelora, and I represent North Guilford. Currently, this is going into my 5th term. I'm serving on the Judiciary Committee, the Public Health Committee, Regulations Review Committee, and the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. I think a couple of the issues I think with education that Hartford may be looking at, it's early right now because we're still proposing bills. A lot of the committees have just met for introductory meetings. The proposed bill deadline is Friday the 15th. And so the committees will start raising bills and we'll start seeing some of the issues coming forth. But I think a couple of the issues, my guess is that the legislature will look at is the school security grants. I know Guilford received a substantial grant for a lot of upgrades. And the way that does work is the local communities provide a matching amount of money for the grants, and then the state will provide a percentage of that. And I think it's worked out very well for all of our communities to help sort of fortify the buildings and make them safer. And I think that's an effort that we may continue because that money did expire this fiscal year with this budget. So we're probably looking to renew that again for the next cycle. I think we're hearing some proposals on privacy issues with concerns about just data being shared with third parties. We've heard it come up in the context of Common Core, just with some of the testing data, but there's going to be, I think, a broader discussion, even where yearbook photos are sent to a third-party organization. So it's just tightening up and making sure in the digital age that privacy is protected. So I think there'll be some discussion in that area. And then the third is the school funding, obviously, but taking a look at the magnet school funding, possible double dipping in certain communities. I think when you look at the way the funding operates is some of the communities receive extra money from magnet schools. And there's some discussion, I know West Hartford in particular has lost a lot of money through the way the mechanism works. And so there's some looking at just bringing parity to that system and making sure that individuals that are going to private school, it doesn't enable the communities to receive twice the amount of grant money. I don't think that kind of issue would affect towns like North Branford or Guilford. I think that those towns may actually benefit from an overhaul, but I think it obviously can end up being a divisive issue.
Mr. Scanlon?
Well, thank you, obviously, to the chair and vice chair and the superintendent, all of you, for having us today. Unlike my friend Rep. Candelora, his 5th term, I'm in my 5th day in office here, so I don't certainly have the breadth of knowledge that he does about sort of what's happening. But I will tell you, in addition to some of the things that he mentioned, one of the issues that I am taking a look at here in the Public Health Committee, which I am on in addition to Environment and Transportation, is the issue of prescription drug abuse. And a few weeks ago, I had the chance to meet with some folks from Guilford who are involved in the DAY Coalition, where we talked a little bit about how this is an issue, not just in Guilford, but in towns all across the state of Connecticut, especially for young people. And I think that it's going to be something that we do take a look at this year on the Public Health Committee, and it's something that I hope to be involved in. But besides that, none of us serve on the Education Committee, but I think that all of us are very interested in working with you and listening to you about some of the things that you see happening in Hartford and coming down the pipeline, and how we can be responsive to those needs and learn what it is that Guilford is looking for in Hartford from us. So I would just say that I have an open door at any time. I know most of you personally, but if we can ever be of any help, or if you have any advice for us, or particularly me as a new legislator, I hope that you'll reach out to us anytime. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Bill. I think I look around the room. I think I've met most of you around this table in the course of my recent campaign, but for those of you who I haven't met before, I'm Ted Kennedy, Jr. I'm your new state senator for the town of Guilford. Many of you know that I replaced the longtime state senator, Ed Meyer, and this district includes Brantford, Guilford, Madison, North Brantford, Durham, and Killingworth. So I am somebody who really wants to benefit from the expertise around this room too. It's like Sean and I, we actually overlap on the 3 committees that we both serve on. I too serve on the Public Health Committee, the Transportation Committee, and I was currently nominated to co-chair the Environment Committee, which Ed Meyer chaired for many years in the state Senate as well. So while not directly involved with specific issues of education, we are taking up issues, and there is, as Vin said, more to come. We know the perennial, what I've discovered as a brand new state senator, is there's many issues in Hartford that tend to be kind of recycled, or you arrive and there's probably 70% of issues are already kind of appear on the agenda by virtue of the fact that they may have passed out of any one of the committees before, but because of some process issue may have died, or not because they weren't good ideas, but because the legislature ran out of time, et cetera. And so we're trying to weed through some of those issues, as well as, of course, as Vin said, the deadline for any member to submit new legislation before any one of these committees is, it runs out at the end of this week, right?
Friday. At
the end of this week. So we'll have a much clearer picture. That doesn't say that that is the total endpoint, because committees can also create committee bills at a later point in time. One of probably the key issues that will come out of the Environment Committee, as some of you may know, is the whole issue of pesticides on school grounds. As some of you are aware, the state legislature did ban the use of pesticides on school grounds up through grade 8, okay? There is a renewed attempt in some parts of this state to extend that ban to include high schools, municipal parks, public squares, places like even the Guilford Green, for example, other places where children and young adults frequent. So that's probably going to be an issue that arises where, I would personally be very interested in the opinion of this board. There's going to be, obviously, education, cost sharing, the way we pay for education. It's all entangled with issues such as property tax reform and other issues where, quite honestly, I'd really like to call on the members of this board and the respective boards of education in all these towns and get your advice and opinions before making a decision, because I think many of you here have been at it for a long, long time, and I could certainly benefit from your advice and perspective, because you've visited a lot of these issues many, many times. So I want to be a resource to you, like Vin and Sean. My door is always open to anybody on this committee, and in fact, any resident of the 12th district. So, and I look forward to working with you and being a resource to this town to make sure that we can together, forward a great education for every single child in the town of Guilford.
Thank you. Questions? Board members have questions of? I know you've made yourselves available to Dr. Freeman, and I think we all appreciate that. I know that he's offered some thoughts and had some requests. But what would we like to share with these?
Well, I have a question. You all mentioned Public Health Committee, and we've been addressing something here in town that has been described as a public health crisis, and that's sleep deprivation in teens and the need to move the high school start time later. I believe your counterparts in New Jersey have actually addressed this, and New Jersey schools, high schools will be starting later at some point. Is this something that you have any familiarity with? It would certainly be easier for us if other towns did this with us. Any thoughts?
I think a couple of years ago I served on an ECS task force which had looked at some of the issues of regionalizing. And part of that discussion came up of having a uniform calendar so all the schools operated on the same days and had the same days off. That was met with a lot of controversy and some difficulty in trying to implement. And it was really done as more of a cost-saving measure as opposed to a public health measure. I don't see it on the radar screen, but I think as we were talking, it's difficult for one school, I think, with the way school sports are especially, to kind of tinker with time. So if it is addressed, I think the state would need to look at it on a statewide basis. So I think it's something that we certainly could put into the hopper and see. I think the issue probably of school age is going to come up first before, especially with Common Core being implemented. Is it appropriate for such young children to be entering kindergarten at such a young age? I think that discussion may end up coming first, but so I don't see it on the radar, but Guilford certainly is putting it on the radar screen, as I think we've all read about it in the papers.
I think to amplify what Mrs. Renner said, there's a body of science that is not debatable. It's sort of like climate change. It's real, that when you move up start time by even a half hour, it has dramatic effects on the health, safety, lowers car accidents in adolescents by up to 70%. But you're right, Mr. Candelora, to do it unilaterally when the rest of the towns around us are reluctant or thinking about it or not, or opposed, makes it very difficult for Guilford. So we want to do the right thing, and it certainly would be helpful to have the state look into this like New Jersey and like Virginia have. Right now in the state of Connecticut, there is one town that has changed start time, and that's Wilton, and that's it. We are interested in pursuing this and looking at it, but there are lots of regional issues, as you point out. So we could use your help on the state level in helping kids. There's no question that going to sleep earlier is not the answer. That, we all had adolescents, or in Mr. Scanlon's case, not too far away from being an adolescent, that it doesn't work.
Well, I think it's something we could certainly start that dialogue, and even have our staff up in Hartford look at the issue as well, and we could serve to help collect data for you. So maybe we could connect later and we can do that.
For example, one of the things that we might be able to do together is do an analysis, for example, of what other states or municipalities have done this. Okay, if that would be helpful to this board. But can I just ask a question now that you raised it? The question of the start dates for school. I know that Guilford just recently implemented all-day kindergarten. I don't know how that implementation is going to impact the start date, the cutoff date by which somebody can, has your board taken a position on start dates for students entering kindergarten?
What age do kids start?
I'm sorry?
school? You mean at what age do kids
Yeah,
start?
whether it's October 1st or January 1st, is there an official position of this
No, we
board?
haven't talked about it. Connecticut is absolutely in the minority of states around the country in allowing younger students to begin school. But no, this board has not taken that conversation up, at least not in the last 3 years.
No, and there really hasn't been at least from what I can see, there hasn't been a lot of interest in the General Assembly about changing that. But that is actually a very legitimate issue to look at. Connecticut is very much an outlier at the age we allow children to start kindergarten. Other questions, Mr. Sands?
Well, there's one area where we could definitely use some help. We understand that there's a deficit at the state level, and that various people are looking at all manner of ways of reducing that deficit. One of the things that's important to this district is reimbursement for certain special education costs. And by law, the state is supposed to reimburse us for costs relating to students where the total cost is over 4.5 times our average cost, which is about $69,000 at the current stage. And the law says we get 100% above reimbursement above the $69,000. Subject to the legislature appropriating the money, which the legislature hasn't been doing. And the result is we've been getting something between 70 and 76, 77%, which varies a lot year to year, makes budgeting somewhat challenging. So at some point, somebody's probably going to say, oh, well, we could save some money in this area and nobody will notice it. And I would ask you to be vigilant if somebody tries a move like that, because that's very important to this district. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of state reimbursement.
And I would just add here that I believe it was last year where you had come up with $1 million worth of savings in a fiscal year from the special ed program. Based on the work that you do here. So I think there's an important story for us to tell in Hartford about the success of a town like Guilford when it comes to this issue, and why towns that are performing like that cannot continue to have further reductions in the reimbursement, because the more people hear about the success we're having here, the more people that are going to come here to be a part of that success. And I think that if you continue to lower that cost of reimbursement and you continue to have more people, we're going to have a real problem, and we're not going to be able to offer the services that you are currently offering to the families of this town. So I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we all want to be a part of making sure that Guilford gets what it needs to maintain that excellent program that you have here in the town.
That'd be very helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Others? I guess I'd just make 2 quick points. One is I think we had a lot of discussion this year about teacher evaluations and the General Assembly's linking teacher evaluations to the performance, in part on the performance on standardized tests. I think all 9 of us, regardless of party, regardless of experience, regardless of anything else, think that that was a really bad idea. And particularly in light of the unknown nature of the standardized test that is linking to the teacher evaluation process. To be fair to the state, we asked for some flexibility in the teacher evaluation program, and we were given it. And so we have taken advantage of the maximum degree of flexibility that the State Department would allow in designing our teacher evaluation program, and we're appreciative of that. However, I think that you're probably going to take a look at that this year. I don't think that's, I'm going too far out on a limb on that. It really, this is an area where we feel pretty comfortable with our teacher evaluation program, and this is respectfully, we kind of don't need Hartford's help on this particular issue, and I say that with the utmost respect, but it's a very hard program to design a one-size-fits-all teacher evaluation program. We're doing okay. and we'd like to try to continue to do, okay? The second thing I guess I'd like to suggest is that if something comes up, you've said your door is open. If something comes up in the education world and you want to know what it would feel like in the town, call us. We would be delighted to continue to work with you the way we've worked with with Mr. Candelora previously, but also with your predecessors, and we are very hopeful that you will continue to work as they did in making sure that we have continue to have an outstanding system here. But you should never have to vote on an education issue wondering how it would affect Guilford or North Branford or Brantford. Call us, and we'd be delighted to sit down and within ethics rules, buy you a cup of coffee and tell you what we think would happen. So,
Thank you.
And I'd like to just comment on what Senator Kennedy pointed out about pesticides where children gather, not just schools, but public places, parks and greens. And by definition, a pesticide is a chemical that kills things. And it clearly is not helpful to growing young children. And by young, I include adolescents. So I applaud your vision to extend it from the elementary, middle school to the high school and public places.
Well, we're going to have, you know, an open hearing on that very same topic, and I think that we're going to look at, you know, all the different points of view as well as all the potential ways to address the issue. So I myself don't like the idea of pesticides, but I think one of the things is we need to keep an open mind about, you know, exactly how and when, and, you know, we should move forward on a proposal like that.
Fair enough.
well, thank you, gentlemen, and then you're in session tomorrow, I take it, so you've probably got to get to Hartford fairly early. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again and speaking as need arises.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
And I guess what I'd like to do is maybe we're running a little bit in a strange order, given that the student reps are here and there are 4 of them. Why don't we just turn directly to the student reps now? You might need to grab another chair. It looks like we're short a chair. But if you could, why don't we go to your report now, if that would be okay? You probably have homework and the rest of it. Seems like there are a lot of you. Were there always 4? Okay. All right, that's fine. Suspensions only.
So at Guilford Lakes, they're on February 3rd, 2015, at 6:30, there will be a meeting for parents of special education students to discuss an overview of special education at Lakes and plan discussion topics for future meetings. And in December, 4th grade students were finishing up a unit of study on digital literacy. Students used the new Chromebooks to research how technology has impacted their lives or changed a product. Students presented their findings through the use of presentation software. And also, on the topic of their well-used technology, the 3rd grade students are researching ocean animals and using hard copy and electronic sources, and they're typing up their reports on Chromebooks. So.
All right. At Melissa Jones, the students seem to be very happy to be back in school, even though they've had a few weeks of indoor recesses due to temperatures. And each different grade is learning different things at this point. 4th graders are starting to read informational texts and describing their opinions on the text. The 3rd graders are reading fairy tales and rewriting fairy tales of their own. 2nd graders are learning how to write science lab reports, which, as I have to write one now, I know is very handy. The 1st graders and kindergartners are reading and sharing ideas about fiction and nonfiction books. And in math, kids are learning about fractions and numeral concepts. And progress reports will be coming soon to the students' parents to see how their kids are doing. And also on January 19th, there will be a skating party hosted by Melissa Jones at the Northford Ice Pavilion.
I spoke with the principal at AW Cox, and he told me the students enjoyed a special treat from performance of the voices for the holiday songs. Also, each year the Cox PTO sponsors a silent auction to raise money at its Fall Harvest Festival. And one of the items auctioned last fall was Principal for the Day. So this past Friday, 4th grade student served as the principal, and was reported that the school ran smoothly and students were grateful for his 2-day no homework announcement for the week.
I received a memo from him today.
Also, before and after school enrichment programs are in full swing, and students have the opportunity to participate in a variety of programs. And lastly, each month the school sponsors a lunchtime lecture series, and in December, representatives from the Brantford Animal Shelter visited their school and talked about the work they do with animals. Afterwards, several 4th graders, students formed a committee to help out, and now they are currently collecting donations to benefit the shelter.
Mr. Grimm from Calvin Lee informed me that it was a quiet month and not too much went on. But at the high school, the first semester is ending, and so we have midterms starting next week, Tuesday of next week. And for seniors at the high school, the college process is continuing. The regular decision deadlines are just about over, and some students are hearing back from where they applied early, and the CSS and FAFSA forms are due soon for financial aid.
Also at the high school, our spring musical, Fiddler on the Roof, the rehearsal process is in full swing again, and Miss Mulqueen, our director, is back in school. The show will be put up the weekend of February 19th, and we'd love anyone who'd like to come to be there. We'd love you to come. And Voices was invited to sing at the governor's inauguration, and we're especially proud of this opportunity as we were the only high school choir invited.
Great.
And also, winter sports off to a great start. In fact, there's a girls' basketball game going on right now, and these seasons will continue on into March, so it'll be good to see how we stack up against other teams.
And lastly, here at the high school, we're proud to announce that now everyone will be wearing green gowns on the day of graduation.
Can you just talk a little bit about how that came to be, the decision, what started it, what were the issues?
For the green gowns?
Yeah.
So we were informed last year there was a group of people, group of girls that would like to not be identified as a certain gender. So they were approached Mr. Masenti and was asked if they could wear a green gown instead of a white gown. So then Mr. Masenti brought this upon the student body, especially the senior class, of this idea of switching over to wearing all green gowns. Just because how this was an issue last year, and it was eating away from him during the summer, and he wanted to make sure that everyone was getting a say and feeling comfortable on the day of graduation, because in reality it's really about that graduating class. This year's about 2015, and the main thing is everyone wants to be comfortable graduating from a 4-year school and going on to the next step in their life. So we decided as a class, and we had Mr. Masenti was very considerate to everyone's opinions, and we actually had a senior assembly during school so everyone could acknowledge different opinions, and it came down to wearing green gowns. And the reason behind it is we're all one, and we dedicate a week of our school to be a unified body, student body. So why not graduate being one?
Terrific. I actually asked some of the old timers, what is it that led to the, the row by row and the row of women and the row of men. Nobody I talked to knew. So that's one of those things that is just because it's always been done the way it's always been done that's not always an argument for doing it that way forever moving forward. But we certainly want to acknowledge your hard work and that the class took this on itself and made this an issue itself, and you should be proud that you were able to accomplish that and doing what your fellow classmates thought was the right decision. So you are one, and that's a good lesson.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
So last meeting, think the school start time was brought up, and we've had some discussions with the community about that, which were not totally unanimous on one side or the other, but
why
just
should
wondering
it
if
be
you had
any
any
different
thoughts on that.
I know there is talk of a survey of teachers and students at the Guilford High School, just about the idea of later start times. And I think that the consensus, or like I think a lot of us talked to our peers at the high school and just to see like how much people really knew about everything that it needs to be considered when discussing this issue. And I think generally there was a lack of knowledge of like all the factors that really do go into it. So I think before a survey like that is distributed, I think like like some kind of assembly like we had with the green gowns, that would be a good idea, just to prepare.
That's very helpful feedback, actually.
That's
good.
So
Yeah, that's
to
terrific.
go off that, I also believe there should also be more of an outline of pros and cons so people have more knowledge of how it's going to affect them. Because looking at both sides, especially for being a junior and senior, it affects, especially for varsity sports, and it also affects if people have jobs after school. And so it has a lot of pros and cons.
A lot of the people who I talked to it about, they would either be in one camp either way very strongly. So a lot of people would say like, oh no, that's awful because of my schedule is going to be completely messed up and it'll be harder for me to do my homework. And other people are thinking, oh, this will be so great. I'll be so much less stress in my life and I'll be able to like go to school and work easier. So I think there's a decent split between the people I've talked to.
We've come to understand that the grown-ups are similarly splitting, but we are really interested in kind of hearing from the group of you that will be most affected by this. So it's helpful, and Mark, I think that advice is something we should pay attention to, that if people are going to be asked questions, they need to be as informed as possible. So thank you. Yeah.
Good. Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you. You can either stick around if you wish or go and do your homework. So,
Thank you very much, guys.
all right. Let's move back to item 3 on the agenda, which is action on the minutes of the December 8, 2014 meeting. They were distributed. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Any changes, corrections, additions?
Yeah. I'd like to see the student reps listed, if we could do that.
Okay. We can do that.
Do that?
Any corrections or additions otherwise?
Oh, I had one other, yeah, I'm sorry, it's minor. On page 4, when we have the approval of the November 10th minutes, there's a typo in the second paragraph, the date of October 27th. Should be November 10th.
Should be what?
November 10th.
Okay.
We just had it.
You got that? On.
Oh, right.
Okay. With that correction, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 5, I'm sorry for jumping around like this, but I think we had to, given the legislative update. Item 5 on the agenda is public forum for topics on the board agenda. Anybody at this point? No? All right. Item 6, review and approval of expenditures for the month of December. Dr. Moore?
So we discussed this in some detail at the Operations Committee prior to this meeting, but again, would like to thank Linda Trudeau, as always, for putting together the summaries of the expenditures and the warrants. Expenditures for the month of December were $5,055,760.03. To summarize the discussion, I think this represents, at the point that we're at in the school year, we've expended about 44.5% of the budget, which is compared to close to 41% the prior year, which is a substantial difference when you're talking about dollars and looking towards the end of the year. The issues that have come up, the biggest one, as Mr. Sands alluded to with our state representatives, is that we have had some unforeseen expenditures in the special needs area. What happens is it's hard to predict what's going to happen in terms of who's going to be in district, and we've had some other people with needs or needs identified that have come into the district, and therefore the expenditures are quite a bit higher than we anticipated. And I know we talked about, actually, we've said often how well we've done in reducing that line, and I think we actually dropped the budget, the appropriations in line with what we expected, and had they stayed where we were last year, we would be in line, but right now we're a bit off. The other issue is, in capital, and one of the things we talked about is that some of the stuff is coming online for the new high school, and there are some expenditures that may be more appropriately expended in the capital bond, but it's something we need to discuss. So we're looking towards the end of the year, but it could be tighter than some of the other years we've had in the past. So we're trying to do some more projections on tuition and long-term things to look at. So that's the basic summary. I don't know if anybody else had any other details they wanted to share.
Any other questions about expenditures? We did talk about this quite a bit in the Finance Committee, Operations Committee meeting. Any other questions? Then is that a motion to approve the expenditures for the month of December?
So
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is communications. I was going to raise the voices being invited to sing at the inauguration. That's terrific. It really is terrific.
It was a great honor, and they did a great job.
Mr. Lembo sent an email, I think, to all of us indicating that you could have heard a pin drop when they were performing, which is fabulous. That's not ideal performance space compared to, say, Woolsey Hall or something like that. But any other communications?
I just wanted to share a personal communication. My husband, Chris Balistraci, who has been involved with the Guilford High School fencing team, well, in reality, since it began in the late 70s, was a fencer here at Guilford, was an assistant coach with the team, I believe, in the early 90s. Since then has on and off been a volunteer assistant coach, has this year been offered an assistant coach position. The team lost their assistant coach last year. He's been very active, again, as a volunteer coach, but spoke with our athletic director, Jake Jarvis, about taking on that assistant coach position. As a member of the board, I just simply wanted to disclose to everyone that that happened and to let people know that if in the future there are any votes related to coaching or assistant coaching or financing that I will be recusing myself from any of that.
Yeah, if anybody has any thoughts about that, obviously let me know, but I think we just need to make sure that it's okay under the ethics code. I think it is, and that it's consistent with board policy, and I think it is, but if anybody takes a look at it and has any questions, let me know and we can revisit it. But congratulations to him and thank him.
Yes,
thank you.
For sure, his history with the fencing program here far precedes my my Board of Ed involvement, but I do want to just make sure that everyone's aware.
And I think the stipend is something like $2,500 or something.
We are not paying for Michael's college tuition with him next year.
I didn't think so.
Well, it's nice that he's receiving a title for what he's already been doing.
All the volunteer hours that he's put in.
And I know we all got a lot of communications on start time. We'll talk about those a little later. What else? Anybody other communications people have?
Perhaps this is a good time to say it. I just want to say that as a Board of Ed member, I got the opportunity to join the most recent learning walk at Cox School, and I just have to say I'm so pleased that that the invitation was extended to Board of Ed members, and just really had a fabulous experience, and it was such a learning experience for me, and I am thoroughly impressed with what happens in our schools. I was certainly impressed before, but the ability to experience both, to observe what's going on in the classroom, but to experience the discussions that happen between our administration, our district leadership, our staff is really very impressive. There's some wonderful work going on here, so I really appreciate being invited to be a part of that.
Thank you. Anybody else? This might be a good place to, now that the winter has started, that we all got an email this morning about the 2-hour delay. I wonder if you could just spend a couple of minutes just telling us what the process is for calling either a delay or a cancellation, and the notification component of it. You know, I think we gave you a little bit of a hard time last year that we were getting calls at 5 in the morning saying it's okay to go back, right, roll over and go back to sleep, which I think didn't play that well with some people. What is it? What's the communication method going to be moving forward, and what's the process that you look at to make a decision?
Sure. I'll start with the decision and then move to into the communication of that. So obviously we begin by monitoring the weather, and we follow both local weather broadcasts, and Mr. Gurnham additionally subscribes to a targeted weather service so that we receive specific information that allows him to both monitor and prepare the school facilities, to prepare for plowing, and shares that information with me so that I'm not necessarily always listening to sensationalized television weather broadcasts. In addition to that, I am part of a collaborative group of superintendents that extends down the shoreline in both directions from Guilford as well as a little bit north, and we collaborate on those decisions. Essentially, on any average snow call, so unless we're looking at a blizzard or a serious nor'easter, that would allow us to make a decision the evening before. But in most events, I will be up at 4 in the morning and contacting Tom Fillion, who is our roads chief, and checking in with our public works department to see what local specific road conditions are in Guilford, and most particularly I'm concerned about north of Route 80. That is always going to be the most challenging part of town. Additionally, there are usually 420 conference calls that begin among the group of superintendents. A number of those folks subscribe to a different meteorological service, and at that time we're comparing notes among our departments of public works, among the services to whom we subscribe, with whom we subscribe, and what we're hearing on just the television broadcasts. It is not uncommon for me to be in touch with Mr. Gurnham to talk about conditions in the buildings, particularly when we're looking at conditions like temps, exceptionally low temps. It's not uncommon for me to be in contact with the local police, and then I'm always in contact with the local bus lot as well. Regardless of what I hear from DPW, if our bus manager has concerns about her staff being able to navigate the roads, then that goes into the calculation. All of that I attempt to digest by 5 o'clock. A decision has to be made essentially. 5 o'clock is about our drop dead time to make that decision, and then we begin publicizing that decision. Last year, I believe, we distributed a survey to the community asking how you would prefer to be notified. We've eliminated the active phone calling because most folks preferred simply to receive the email message. We also post to our website, we post to GCTV, we post to all the major news stations, and we post to a Connecticut website that lists school closings for school districts. And in fact, just last week and this week, Mrs. Hahn has been investigating the option of using our school messenger service to be able to actively send text messages to our community. While we heard rather clearly last year that folks prefer not to receive a telephone call with a recorded message telling you it's okay to keep sleeping, there is an interest in text messaging. In fact, there's a group of parents who believe that we used to text message, and in fact we've never sent text messages before. But we now have the capacity to do so. We can't do that unilaterally because not everybody has free texting. The FCC, I believe, has a regulation that we cannot send texts. School Messenger, the service that we subscribe with, can't send text messages without an affirmative permission being granted. But we are working on the idea of sending out an invitation. Community members will be able to respond, and as long as we know that we have a cell phone number as one of the primary contacts, we might be adding text message alerts as well as the email updates and all the other vehicles that we use to update.
Okay, anybody have any questions about this? Or?
Also recently changed from 90-minute to 2-hour delays. Can you explain the rationale of that?
Yes. We were one of the outlier holdouts for a 90-minute delay. The reason we were holding on to a 90-minute delay is that with our AM and PM kindergarten, 90 minutes allowed us to more easily still have both sessions without having to cancel AM kindergarten every time that we had a delay. Now that we've shifted to full-day kindergarten, there's no longer an hour requirement for what counts as a day of school, and it seems more logical that a 2-hour delay allows us more time for the sun to come up, more time for the road crews to attack the conditions, more time for our local crews to prepare the parking lots. Without trying to squeeze in 2 kindergartens, we thought that the 2-hour delay gave us more opportunity. An additional benefit is that the 2-hour delay aligns more with neighboring communities. So where we have staff who work in Guilford but may have students who attend school in another district or vice versa, we align with, I think, more than 90% of our surrounding districts by shifting to a 2-hour delay. And that is something that we began publicizing, I believe, in October to make sure that the community would be aware. While I have received feedback over the last couple of weeks about calls both ways, calls not to delay, and today being the first actual delay, we didn't seem to experience any confusion around the shift from 90 minutes to 2 hours, so that seemed to go very well. Thank you for asking the question.
Okay, anything else on that? All right, so you're going to try to make calls by 5 a.m., is that the plan?
Yes, when it's based on weather conditions, we try to make the decision by 5 a.m. We begin the school messenger. Not everybody receives. School messenger works in cycles, but the expectation is that if we make a call by 5 a.m., that the calls are received by 5:15 or 5:20 as Mrs. Hahn posts to all of those news stations and begins the school messenger, which is automated and goes through a calling cycle. If your phone line is busy, it will call you back, so not everybody gets that call immediately at 5 a.m. There are circumstances, broken pipes, surprise circumstances where sometimes closing will be announced later than that, but when it's weather related, we try to always make the call by 5 a.m.
Okay. All right, when are you, do you want to turn to item 9 on the agenda? That's your report, and starting with the budget presentation?
I'd be happy to.
Sure.
Or doesn't mind, I'll step over the podium. And if this turns on, I'll be able to use the slides. There you go. So again, I'm pleased this year to be able to present the superintendent's proposed budget for fiscal year 15-16. This is the first opportunity for me to present this budget both to you, the board, and to the community at large. I'll begin by taking you through some slides which with you are already familiar, but this is a component of the budget build that we take very seriously. Every year we know that this budget begins by re-examining some foundational pieces of the work that we do in the school system. A budget document is one of the most important documents that a school system prepares every year. It is a concrete representation of the values of the community and the school system. It makes clearer than any other document how we intend to approach our work and where we intend to place emphasis moving forward. So each year as we begin this process, we begin by revisiting our vision and our mission in the school system. Each year, this board works to re-articulate our priorities for the school year. So this year, those priorities were again sharpened and re-articulated, and they fall into 3 broad categories. First, really talks about the classroom experience. We re-articulated this year that all students will be engaged in academically rigorous tasks every day in every class. And we defined what we mean when we talk about academically rigorous within the educational community. We expect that instruction in the school district will be aligned with content area standards. That focuses on our work moving forward. We expect that our priorities will be aligned with our principles of learning, which speaks to our history looking back. We expect that our instruction will be measured by ongoing and diverse assessments and by observations with the Guilford Framework for Teaching and Learning, which speaks to the work we've done over the last few years around teacher and administrator supervision and evaluation. The second priority really speaks to how we support that work in district, and we have said that teaching and learning in this district is supported by intentionally, instructionally focused leadership. We are leaders of instruction in the school district. We are not managers. By subject area coaches and specialists who are full-time professional developers on the ground in Guilford, through professional learning communities through which we build upon the expertise and value the experiences of the teachers in the classroom, and through appropriate instructional resources. And finally, speaking to the environment in which this learning occurs, we remind our community that our schools are expected to be safe and healthy and caring places where learning will occur, built upon relationships between adults and students, and helping those students to shape and model positive decision-making strengths and skills moving forward. That each year leads to a set of initiatives. While those three priorities have remained relatively stable, we have sharpened and shaped the articulation each year, but the initiatives change each year. This year we knew that we had on our plate continuing to look at our capacity to support our highest achieving students, as we have looked at our capacity in the past to support our special education students. We know that this year we need to successfully and carefully see through the implementation of full-day kindergarten, which we launched this September. We knew this year that we needed to expand math supports as we look to move in alignment with Common Core state standards and look locally at how that impacts specifically our mathematics instruction. We need to continue to support that instruction in the classroom through new resources and through content-focused professional development. We know that we need to continue to improve our communication with our policy, with our policy makers around the state. We saw an example of that tonight, but also, and even more importantly, with our most important constituency, the students and their parents with whom we work every day. And we need to continue to develop our understanding of balanced assessment and how assessment continues to every day feed quality instruction. As we move into a new generation of state-level assessments, we need to look at what we do both at that level and on the local level. Each year, that mission, the vision, our priorities, and our initiatives feed down to a sharper lens, and as we look to add any single request or any single expenditure to our budget, we work to provide a crucible, a set of budget priorities through which we're going to view each request. First, everything that we put into this budget, every dollar that we spend, has to work to help us build a safe and healthy school environment. The very next priority is that every dollar that we spend should build and sharpen our focus on instruction and learning. That's why we are here. This year specifically, working on alignment to new standards and assessments, continuing to look at high achieving learners, and that sharp focus on mathematics. Every opportunity is made to continue to extend or improve those opportunities for our learners. I've said in every budget that I have not brought forward a status quo budget. We're not looking just to be as safe as we were last year, just to be as effective as we were instructionally last year. Everything we do should be in the service of continual improvement. This year we've hosted conversations around start times, again, the high achieving learners, or an international baccalaureate program, and how any of those components could help us to extend or improve the opportunities that we offer. And then finally, we expect creativity to be a value, to be one of our priorities. How are we looking at resources, and how are we considering using existing resources differently before asking for any new resource to be added to our request? And the final consideration is enrollment. Obviously, we budget for the students who we expect to see. At a recent meeting, we shared a new 10-year enrollment and demographic projection with this Board of Education. The most immediate change you see in front of you. We do expect to have a decrease in student enrollment overall next year, an overall decrease of approximately 73 students. You'll see by the slide that that is primarily impacting the elementary grades. Of that reduction, 64 students. We're projecting to be 64 students fewer in our elementary grades moving forward in this budget. Bringing those lenses together with all of that as a starting place, we work with our building principals, we work with our department heads, and we begin our budget build. Rather than waiting for the end for a big reveal, I share the budget request early on in the presentation. This year's budget request is for $57,593,867 for the operation of the Guilford Public Schools in school year 15-16. That's an increase budget year over budget year of $1,483,490, or a percent increase of 2.64%. To put that in some context, that is one of the lowest requests that we've brought forward in the last 6-year period. The budget that we present tonight builds upon internal efficiencies that we have already recognized. I'm going to draw your attention early on in the presentation to the fact that I am going to have some contradictions built in. I will speak about the same topic as both an efficiency and a cost driver in this budget in more than one instance. The first one being salaries. Salaries are the single largest investment that we make. Salaries represent approximately 60% of our total operating budget. These are the salaries that support the classroom teachers, the paraprofessionals, the clerical supports, the custodial supports, kitchen workers, nurses, everybody who comes into the buildings to support our children. Education is a people-intensive process. I speak first about the salary line as an efficiency. While it represents our single largest expenditure, based on a percent increase, it is essentially flat this year. Our salary line will be increasing by less than 1% this year across all of our employee groups as we move forward. The reason for that is one, because our enrollment is going down, and we've looked carefully at numbers, and we will be recommending reduced teaching positions at the elementary schools this year. We've also been thoughtful and careful and intentional in the way that we rehire following retirements. And so over the last few years, while we have had a significant number of staff who have retired out, we've been careful about looking at that position, looking at how that position is used and where it is assigned, and then hiring talent, but recognizing that we might be able to hire talent that comes in at a lower cost level by hiring with fewer years of experience than the retirement that preceded. I also want to note, and I want to give the Board of Education credit for this, we've renegotiated 5 of our 6 contracts in the last year. And the Board of Ed, while being fair and supportive of our employees, has also found ways to be efficient and to offer favorable contract negotiations so that we benefit individual employees but also benefit this community and this school system as a whole. Salaries, again, our biggest single expenditure and essentially flat in this budget when looked at from a percent increase point of view. I also want to mention again, and it came up earlier tonight, the work that has been done in special education to be able to support more of our students home here in Guilford. First, because it's the right thing to do, and secondly, because it does offer a financial efficiency. I believe we're able to deliver a better service at a lower cost by keeping more students at home. I have a slide that'll follow to illustrate that efficiency. Supplies and materials, I've noted every year. Our principals do a very good job watching what is used in the buildings, trying to ensure that we have exactly what is needed in the classroom, but making sure that we're not stocking closets with unused materials. They work very hard to keep those levels low. This year, because of reduced enrollments, and because of significant efficiencies in heating as we move into the new high school, and it's worth noting that heating oil is carried under supplies and materials, there's a significant efficiency in that line. And while it doesn't necessarily impact this budget request directly, I do want to note the work that the school system has done working to bring revenue into the district. You know, the board knows that our budget request is essentially an expenditure request for each year going forward. We don't necessarily work with a revenue and expenditure ledger the way that a private business would. But I do want to note that through the efforts of staff members here in Guilford, we received 2 significant grant awards this year. Mr. Mitchell wrote for a technology award and received over $100,000 in technology. The grant was shaped in a way that the writing for the grant needed to help the school district prepare and move forward for the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Mr. Mitchell was able to write that grant in such a way that we have been able to supplement, not supplant, but supplement technology spending that has gone into user stations, essentially the Chromebooks that you heard referenced during the student report today. We have a workshop meeting scheduled for you later this year. We'll talk further about that, but I want to give Mr. Mitchell credit, and I want the community to know that when we talk about efficiencies, we don't just work on bringing our bottom line down, we look for ways to supplement the town spending as well. And in the area of facilities, Mr. Gurnham in his office wrote for a grant around school security, and they secured a grant in excess of $800,000 this year that offset security spending that this community committed to last year. So in that case, I just want to applaud everybody involved. The town committed to the spending because it was the right thing to do, not knowing that this grant was even on the table. And by putting in the time and the energy required, Mr. Gurnham was able to get the state to reimburse Guilford $800,000 of that spending for the security work that we would have done in our schools anyway. I can't understate the importance of this grant. $800,000 is what communities like New Haven and Bridgeport received. It is approximately 8 times the amount that other districts of comparable size and affluence received in this grant proposal. And the entire community and Mr. Gurnham deserve applause for that grant coming to Guilford. I want to further illustrate the special education, the tuition efficiency that I noticed. Very simply, this graph, this bar chart shows outplacements, those students for whom we have been paying tuition over the last few years rather than doing our best to keep those students at home. In school year 11 and 12, this is by percentage, 12% of our special education population was educated in a school other than a Guilford public school in school year 11 and 12. By building our local capacity, by looking at our ability to support those students here in school, this year, in school year 14-15, approximately 6% of our special education population is being educated outside of the Guilford public schools in a school other than a Guilford public school. To me, there's 2 important pieces there. The first is that we do a better job, and the second is that that means that we're not writing a tuition check out somewhere else. Now, there are still resources that are required to support those students, but the resources that we expend stay here in our Guilford schools when we keep those students home in our Guilford schools. It is better for the students, it is better for their parents, it's better for their peers who get to know their neighbors who live in the Guilford community. It's just a win-win all around, and this is an important efficiency on which we've been focusing for the last several years. Just as the budget includes efficiencies, it includes investments. I have said every year, and every year I've apologized that the background doesn't show there, but there's a nice graphic that goes with that slide. I don't ever intend to bring forward a status quo budget. I don't believe that my role in this school district is to keep things moving as well as they're moving now. I believe that our job is always to find ways to improve what we offer to the students of Guilford, and so every year I intend to bring you a budget that is forward-looking and forward-thinking, which means I'm going to ask this community to make investments in our schooling. None of these will be surprises to you. I believe that we've talked about all of these. This year, this community, in fact, for the last 2 or 3 years, this community has been talking about the opportunity to explore an international baccalaureate program, another high-level stretched curriculum that could be offered at the high school level so that students or more students could take advantage, could challenge really high-level curriculum at the high school. I don't show a dollar impact for this because this budget is always written as an annual request, and there are no new monies associated with this budget related to an international baccalaureate program. Should this board approve this work moving forward, should this board approve an application for the international baccalaureate program, there are no new monies that need to be requested to do that over last year's budget. In fact, there's a reduction in the dollars that this board committed last year for international baccalaureate work and what we are putting into this budget moving forward. So for sure, there are still expenditures. At this point, we have a 0.5 FTE at the high school that is committed to this exploration, this study, and including our community in this conversation. Should the board want to move forward, that same 0.5 would pick up primary responsibility for beginning to write the application and beginning to fill the position of liaison with the International Baccalaureate program. But it's the same 0.5 FTE that is in your current budget. There were monies for professional development for staff at the high school around the International Baccalaureate program last year. While we continue to have monies for that professional development, those have essentially been halved. So there are fewer dollars for this moving forward than there were in last year's budget. We've had a significant conversation about start times in this community over the last several weeks. The next item on our agenda is for me to update the board and the community on where I believe we stand at this point. I believe that we will continue the conversation and we will continue to look carefully at start times over next year. I don't believe, however, that there will be a financial impact of start times in the budget for next year for two reasons. I believe that there are small, low-cost or no-cost opportunities. So if the decision is made to impact start times quickly, I believe that we can have an impact in a small way at no cost. Following last week's public hearing, I will be recommending to this board in our next agenda item that if we want to look at this thoughtfully, deeply, and possibly look to farther reaching changes, I can't recommend doing that and being prepared for September. And I'll talk about that more further, but in either case, I don't believe that there's going to be a financial investment here. Should we decide to both go fast and go big, we will need to add dollars around this investment. We've been working over the last several years to build the line in our operating budget that allows us to maintain our buildings better. We've made significant growth in that line item over the last 4 budgets, and this year we continue that investing. I'm looking for another significant investment into the site improvement line. This is an increase in that line of approximately 5%. I was hoping to increase by 10% for a series of years, but for a number of other reasons, there's approximately a 5% increase in this budget request. We have talked primarily over the summer and through the end of last school year. We haven't talked in depth about teacher supervision and evaluation over the beginning of this school year, although it did come up tonight. I do want to remind the board that this year we have accepted responsibility for a significant unfunded mandate. This is the first year in which 100% of our certified employees are required to go through the new teacher and principal evaluation process. Our administrators at the building level are rising to this challenge, and they're doing so incredibly well. But the fact is, this is a significant time impact. We're recommending in this budget that we look at our administrative work. We are not recommending that we have any FTEs in administrative staffing. We are proposing that we look to 4 of our 10-month administrative positions and stretch those to 12 months. This would allow us to take work that currently happens during the school year and shift it into the summer months so that we're creating more time when teachers and students are in the buildings and on the ground for those 10-month employees to be taking a greater share of the teacher supervision and evaluation workload. By shifting 4 10-month positions into 12-month positions, you can roughly think of it as picking up 8 months worth of work for $70,000. This would increase those 4 positions and increase their work year. If we were alternately to ask for 1 10-month FTE, That would be a cost of approximately $120,000 in salary, plus we would have to add benefits to that. So you can almost compare a $130,000 or $40,000 value in work time for the $70,000 that we are proposing here. It doesn't increase the number of administrators or the administrative FTEs. It does ask some of those people to work longer school years. I'll also note that in this year's budget, we built in $50,000 of undesignated funds to support the administrative work of the evaluation process. That money is not carried in next year's budget. So it's really $20,000 of new monies that we're requesting to help with this workload. I wasn't comfortable simply putting up $20,000 because it doesn't represent the full cost of the administrative increase. So while this is a $70,000 figure, it's really only $20,000 of new money. The only FTE increases that you will be hearing about in this budget are related to custodial work. We are suggesting that we have an additional 2 custodians that are added to this budget. This is related to the fact that the new high school is larger than the high school out of which we will be moving, and the high school in which we're currently residing is understaffed at this time. There was a request last year to begin scaling up to this, and we chose to remove that from the budget. The logic of scaling up to a building that we weren't occupied didn't hold up under budget scrutiny, but I do have those 2 custodial requests here, and as we have further conversations, we will be sharing with you a square footage breakdown for every custodian in the district. I also want to note, again, cycling back to the efficiencies, this number of custodians is reduced. It's smaller than what we asked for last year because we were able to negotiate some contract language in the custodial contract that allows us to pull substitutes from outside the bargaining unit in to cover, and it frees up positions that we had previously used as floating positions to take the work. So again, I want to give credit for creative thinking and for the work of this board in negotiating contracts that are favorable to both parties. This budget also includes monies that are being set aside for a collaborative position that is currently under discussion with the town. This is probably the investment around which I've had the least amount of conversation with this board. This will be a place that will require further conversation. The town invited Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Bowden and I to meet with them to discuss getting ourselves on the same page in the area of technology. This has been sparked by some movements at the town level in positions, but also sparked by a town-wide conversation we had about security as we looked at our new high school. We don't work from common platforms. The town, the police, the fire, and the school district don't share a coordinated technological platform. We don't cooperate, I think, as closely as we could. We're not recognizing as many efficiencies as we might. This is a placeholder at this time. The idea at the moment is that this would be a position that reports to both the schools and the town. It would sit above any positions that we currently have and would help to organize the work in the area of communications, technology, security across both the schools and the town. And obviously there'll need to be more conversation had here. That's a total investment package of $295,000. By comparison, this slide last year totaled up to $799,000. When we talk about investment this year, we are talking about focusing on the work that is already on the table. There are no wholly new initiatives that are connected with this budget. We need to continue to make sure that we roll out full day K well. We need to continue to focus on the special education work that we have done. We need to continue to focus on new standards and new assessments that are shaping instruction in Guilford and all of Connecticut and all of the country moving forward. And we've heard very clearly from our community that locally we want to continue to focus on mathematics instruction and on how we support all of our students, including those who are achieving at the highest end. There's nothing new besides that this budget looks to support. There's no new component that I introduce here tonight. In addition to the efficiencies, in addition to the investments that we choose to make as a board and as a community, every budget also includes unavoidable cost drivers, the cost of doing business. I identify those here, and here's where I'm going to contradict myself. Salary increase. I just described the salary increase as being essentially flat when viewed from a percent base. Our salaries across the district increase by less than 1%. But when that number is the single biggest expenditure, even a small percentage increase becomes a significant dollar increase. So our salary account this year will increase by $287,000. Medical insurance, I didn't break out and call it an efficiency. I just couldn't bring myself to do that. However, we have worked hard on medical insurance in the district. This board and this town have brought in a new outside consultant to help bring a set of fresh eyes to how we provide this benefit to our employees. We have adjusted our package. We've moved our stop loss number. We've looked carefully at medical insurance, both in how we manage what we have now, and again, by bringing new ideas to the negotiating table and asking our employees to think about that benefit differently in a way that will meet their needs, but in a way that would be cost effective for this community. The medical insurance increase this year is approximately 3.5%. But again, it's a significant line item, so we're looking at an increase of $309,000. I'll point out that at this presentation last year, the medical insurance increase that we were discussing was 15 to 16%. It's an efficiency in that we have controlled to some degree that spending, but it's still a significant cost driver. Maybe an investment that we'd prefer not to make, but an investment that we cannot avoid. Electrical costs are increasing this school year significantly, and there's two specific reasons for that. One is that we are experiencing an electrical rate increase, as is everybody, and two is that as we shift to our new high school, which is a new resource and which is a highly energy efficient building, we have to recognize that as a community that will be moving into a new high school that is climate controlled and moving from an old high school that simply was not. So while it is a more efficient building, the electrical draw is significantly larger. When you compound that with the new rate increases, you see a significant increase in the electrical expenditures this year. We have a decrease in heating expenditures, but one does not offset the other. The electrical increase is greater than the savings that we will be recognizing in heat. At a recent Board of Finance meeting, the community that was present or viewing that meeting were reminded that this was part of the referendum moving forward. We knew that we'd be moving to a more efficient building, but we knew that we would be controlling costs. We would be avoiding costs moving forward. We knew that it would be a more expensive proposition to provide climate control in the new school. And then, while I have spoken about special education tuition as an efficiency, I pull out two special ed components today to note as cost drivers. Special education, special services, these are essentially the contracted services that we bring into our school district. Those services are increasing. As we have talked about bringing more students back to district or holding more students back in district, we have to recognize that those students are going to have needs that we need to meet. And so this line, which provides for outside evaluations, outside behavioral services, the work of experts to come in and help train our staff, or to work directly with students in areas like speech and language, when it goes beyond what our own staff has the capacity to meet, we bring in outside services. This is an adjustment that is being made moving forward. We've made this adjustment in the current budget, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And special education transportation is increasing significantly. This, again, is for a variety of reasons. One, I believe that we may have been overly aggressive in the savings that we predicted in this area last year. Where we were able to reduce tuitions in some schools, it wasn't necessarily a one-to-one savings in transportation. Even if we reduced a tuition at one school, if multiple students attended that school, we didn't reduce the transportation related to that. Additionally, we have been bidding our special ed transportation out for approximately 4 years at this time. And while that generated an initial savings, I believe 4 years of public bidding may have run out the savings that was associated with that process. When you look at these 5 areas alone, that represents a cost increase to our budget of $1.4 million. And I'll remind you that the overall increase we're asking for in this budget is $1.4 million. To a large degree, it is these areas that are generating the increase that we see in our budget moving forward. I want to take two of these cost drivers and look at them in greater depth, the first being staffing, that salary line. Again, I'll note that administratively our FTEs are flat. We are not asking for any increase or decrease in administrative staffing. While our enrollment is dropping, the expectations, the unfunded mandates on administrators are in fact increasing. Our demographics show that we are a frugally administered district at this time. We are suggesting increasing hours, again, taking 4 10-month positions and stretching those across the full calendar year. In the teacher ranks, with a reduction of approximately 65 students at the elementary level, we've looked at class sizes. We are not suggesting any increase in class sizes. We project to maintain class sizes that will be in the high teens in the school district next year as they are this year, but we can reduce 5 elementary teaching positions next year moving forward. And we are looking to increase by 1.5 special education positions. And we are looking to increase by 1 FTE at the high school. That would be spread across multiple subject areas. That is in response to a number of conversations we've had this year about increasing graduation requirements, about the flexibility of scheduling at the high school and the opportunity for students to gain access to classes. That would be a net decrease of staffing in the teacher ranks of 2.5. In the Clerical Association, in the para ranks, we will be looking at a reduction of 1.5 para positions next year. One of them is associated with 1 fewer kindergarten classes. And again, I mentioned earlier, the only increase in staffing that you will see in this budget is a request to increase custodial staffing by 2 positions at the high school. Additionally, I want to look at special education, and I want to look at it differently than what we've provided in your budget book. Your budget book and the comparisons therein are built on approved budget to requested budget. We've talked this year about special education needs that are happening this year. We've talked in the operations committee about what has driven those changes, but we know that this year we've had increased tuition costs, special services, and transportation. We've projected the spending in this budget in those 3 areas. If you compare next year's proposed budget to the monies we know that we will spend in these 3 lines this year, you're not looking at 3 lines that increase. So over the monies that we know we will expend this year in tuition, next year's request is in fact a reduction of approximately 7%. When you compare those contracted services I spoke about in next year's request compared to this year's spending, they're essentially flat. And when you compare special ed transportation next year compared to what we know we will spend this year, it is a decrease of approximately 8.5%. So while these were not costs that we anticipated at this time this year, they are costs that we have built into the operating budget at this time and are working to provide for at this time. Your budget book, however, needs to be prepared comparing the requested budget to the approved budget. So when you add this slide to the 3-page summary that you have, you can think of these increases in 2 different ways. Finally, I want to point out that the budget that we bring forward to you does not include everything that we thought was important moving forward. It is a forward-looking budget, but we've also talked about being thoughtful and intentional and rolling out change at a controlled pace. So while I would have been happy to be here today, beginning to sneak into Dr. Borland's report that you've received but we haven't planned for discussion tonight, and talking about math coaches at the elementary level, I don't believe that we're prepared to move forward or that that's an investment that I'm prepared to recommend for this budget. We'll talk more about that with Dr. Borland when he comes. Mr. Mitchell will tell you that we're ready to absorb more technology in the district. I'm concerned about our staff's ability to absorb that technology into the classroom and want to be thoughtful about how we roll that technology out into the schools. So while we have a significant new influx and while we're exciting to talk to you about the work that we are doing, it's maybe not as much or as fast as we would otherwise like to go. Every year, building level principals and department heads request equipment, and every year we prioritize that list and try to only purchase what we know we will really need. I have a list of additional equipment requests that I'd be happy to bring forward, but I am withholding. And again, I mentioned that while I'm proud of the work we've done improving the site improvement line, there's always more room to care better for these buildings. And again, in the same vein, we try to prioritize the work and not ask to have everything done all at once. The theme to this year's budget is the same theme with which we opened the school year. It's focusing on the work that is on our plate currently and doing that work well. And that's not easy. That's not resting on our laurels. That is a lot to do. And I am happy to invest the time, and I'm happy to ask this community to invest the dollars to do that work well. Having said that, you see a similar slide every year, but when we ask for this investment, I want to be sure that the community recognizes that we see a significant return on that investment. I continue to be incredibly proud of this school district. We remain one of the most successful and one of the most recognized school systems in the state, and I would put us up against any other system by any measure. This year, we have invited multiple objective outside folks to come in and look at the work that we do. We hosted a learning walk in this high school where we had superintendents from across the state and experts from UConn and Harvard and the Connecticut Center for School Change who came in to look at our work. They had areas that they knew we could look at more carefully, but they walked away impressed. We had invitations to videotape English classes in this high school to be shared in classrooms at Harvard to show folks how that should be done. We asked Dr. Borland to come in. I am excited about the recommendations that he is going to provide for us, but I also know that he sat and in his debriefing with me called us one of the most impressive educational enterprises with which he's been involved. So he knows that we can be better. He's going to help us focus our attention where we can be better, but he recognizes the excellence. By standardized test scores, by graduation rates or college placement rates or continuing education rates, we've had our students perform recently locally in a version of Our Town that was spectacular, and you heard already tonight that they were the only high school choir invited to perform at our governor's inauguration. Our athletic teams continue to make us proud. We do great with the investments that this community makes. And we maintain our focus on learning and instruction while remaining open-minded to constructive feedback and continuous improvement. I applaud us simply for being willing to embrace the discussion about changing our start times. The conversation we had last week with more than 100 students, and I don't know that there was close to 100 opinions, I think, but with 100 community members who came out, there was enthusiasm, there was positive spirit, and we're going to continue that conversation. Our students shared with you today that they've taken the initiative to change tradition around here. We bring in Dr. Borland, we bring in the Connecticut Center for School Change. We know we need to do better. That doesn't mean that we don't recognize what we do well, and we've never lost our focus on teaching and learning. And Mr. Bloss continues to say this better than I, but we continue to be an unparalleled value. When you compare us to any other comparable district, and when you compare our investments to our results, we get a better bang for our buck than most comparable school districts. And that's almost by any measure. It's by medium income, it's by tax base, it is by our per student spending. I'm proud to bring this budget forward to you, to this community. I know that we will have lots of time to have conversations about this proposal over the next several weeks, and I'm happy to begin that conversation tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Freeman. I guess before maybe we start to talk, I don't know that we're going to have a long discussion about this tonight, obviously, because we do have several meetings in the near future about this. I think maybe we should talk about the timeline, Dr. Freeman, if you have that with us. Ms. Renner, your committee, the Operations Committee, has a meeting, I think, with the Board of Finance next Tuesday, as I recall. Is that right?
Yes.
At 6 or 6:30?
Yes.
Yep.
In the next 2 weeks, we've got a meeting scheduled to continue the conversation at the board level. We've got 2 public hearings where we invite the community to come in and comment on this proposal. The community's already come in once to comment on the budget more broadly. Now they have something on which to comment, and we do have a meeting scheduled with the Education Committee of the Board of Finance as well, all within the next 2 weeks, I believe.
Okay, and the dates for public input, I think, are 2 weeks from tonight.
January 26th and 27th, and those are scheduled at Adams Middle School again, and that again is the public hearing where the public has the opportunity to comment on this proposal.
Okay. All right, I know we just got these fairly recently. We've got lots, and then we'll probably vote on whatever we move forward to the Board of Finance, I assume at our March regular meeting or in a special meeting in early March?
February
There's a February.
I'm sorry, February. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
My wishful thinking.
We're scheduled to do our February regular meeting, but we always have March as a fallback. Should we get into lengthier deliberations, I don't think there'd be any problem if we didn't approve until.
Generally, we do it in February at the regular
Yes.
meeting. Sometimes we have a special meeting of one sort or another. if
It
need
is
be,
on
On the
but-
calendar, it's scheduled for February 2nd for a special meeting. If not, it can go to the regular meeting, I believe.
Okay, well, we can talk about that moving forward. Okay.
I thought I had a copy with me.
Do people have any initial comments or questions or thoughts that we should delve into tonight, or?
Just very quickly, the custodian's figure is a loaded number with benefits and so forth for 2 positions?
Absolutely. And because of the size of that bargaining group, we do not work with an average for the benefit. We load it with the family highest rate. It is such a small group. With the teacher group, with such a large number of employees, we work with a benefit figure that averages the single, the 2-person, and the family size. And in a large group, we can accommodate for that. The custodian group being so small in number, yes, we are budgeting for the highest possible expenditure, salaries combined with benefits. Should we be lucky enough to hire somebody who doesn't draw benefits or family benefits, it would be a lower expenditure.
And a just very brief description of the site improvements.
I'd have to defer to our next conversation. I'll be happy to make sure that we have the list. We do have a completely budgeted list for the entire line item, and we can itemize that. I didn't bring that for tonight's presentation and don't want to misspeak.
Yes.
Question, you noted in the presentation the reduction of 5 elementary positions, and we don't have page numbers in here, but I see 4 identified across the 4 elementary schools here. I'm wondering where the 5th position is.
So
Is it the social worker? I mean,
No,
there's a decrease in a social worker?
I'll go back and check the figure.
Okay.
Essentially, and I will give this to you specifically, but essentially, we've got large 4th grades moving out, and you can
Right.
look at how
Right.
Baldwin increases in size, and much smaller projected kindergartens flowing in. So we've got a reduction at the 4th grade level where a large class is moving out, and we're spreading the staff across. In one specific building, the projection for kindergarten is so low that we're projecting eliminating both a 3rd grade class size as that 4th grade class moves out, 4th grade section as
Right.
the 4th grade moves out, and a kindergarten section as well.
Okay.
In the other schools, while the kindergarten classes are small, they're not small enough that we can reduce the size, the number of kindergarten sections. Remember, when we came forward with full-day kindergarten, we suggested that we were not going to increase class sizes above 20. We've got some kindergarten classes this year that are running in the high teens. The opportunity to reduce those a few is something we'd like to take advantage of. I'll have specifics for those at your next meeting.
Related to that, if we could get, I'm sure you've worked up class loading estimates at least that led to these figures being created. I think that'd be helpful for us to look at.
Yes, we can show this to you in the format that Dr. Moore provided a few years ago, which will show you projected class sections for next year. You'll be able to see every section.
Okay, that'd be great. Yes.
On the central office non-certified salaries, can you just clarify exactly what's happening there? Technology, you're adding 1.5 FTE and dropping 1 in finance. So what's that going to mean in terms of personnel?
Yeah, there's 2 things happening there. None of it involves any increase in staffing. So one is that we are correcting the placement of 2 of our employees. We carry 2 lines, central office certified and central office non-certified. Currently, we have Mr. Mitchell in the central office certified line, and we have Mrs. Trudeau in the central office non-certified line. Mrs. Trudeau holds a state of Connecticut certification, and Mr. Mitchell does not. So we have moved those two employees, placing them in the appropriate categories. There is a differential in salaries. Mr. Mitchell is paid at a higher rate than Mrs. Trudeau, and so it affects both of those lines. One of the pieces that Mr. Bowden has been doing since he came on board is looking at our staffing plan, and one of the corrections that has been made is that our IT department, we have been paying a number of people, and we were carrying one fewer in our staffing plan. So that is a correction in staffing, while it is not an increase in staffing. There are no technology positions being added to this year's budget, but we needed to add one to the salary line because we were not accounting for one of the salaries that was being paid. So that's a correction that was turned up in the audit that we've been conducting.
But there's an increase. I mean, if you look at central certified and non-certified together, there's still an increase of 120 something.
Yeah, the other component is the points, the .5 shared position with the town, the $60,000 that I pointed out.
But then there's still like a 60K increase, right? Like there's $120,000.
$60,000 for the .5 shared position with the town for the technology person is the other part of that change in the central office non-certified.
Right.
All of the salary lines also include salary increases. So the average salary increase for an employee was between 2% and 3% this year. So that line is going to have the town position, it's going to have the correction that I mentioned with Mrs. Trudeau and Mr. Mitchell, it's going to have the 2 to 3% increase for each of those employees. And we can break that number down further if you like.
It just seems like the increase in the non-certified should be reflected in a decrease in the certified if we're switching. I mean, yes, the only one we're adding is the shared town position.
The only position being added is the shared town.
We talked about this a little bit, but what do you see specifically as the benefits to, go for public schools from helping to fund this technology person?
I think the benefits are more immediately on the town side. I think the only benefits for the school are long-term. I think that Mr. Mitchell has done a fine job keeping our technological house in order. I think the lease that we've entered into for replacement materials, and I think the work that we have done in this area has been exemplary. In fact, there have been opportunities where we have been able to afford some assistance to the town. So I think the most immediate benefit is going to be at the town side. I think long-term, there will be some benefits through collaboration, through efficiencies of scale, through a more unified platform and approach. The town has commissioned a study, and they have brought in an outside evaluator to look at the way we offer this. We would not be the first town to try to include the town and the schools into a platform, but I have to be honest and note that our benefits would be longer term and further down the road. I don't project an immediate boon for us next year by investing in this.
There's still dialogue going on about that, and we'll see. I mean, this is something we're going to have to talk about.
You're going to give us a more detailed breakdown on why you're requesting these 2 additional custodians?
Yes, you're going to get a breakdown per individual and how many square feet each is responsible for. Yes.
Okay. But for the custodians, actually, I mean, you said 2 for the high school, but it looks like they're increasing in the elementary schools. I mean, the way it's broken down.
Again, when you combine this request with the work that was, with the gains that were achieved through negotiations, we actually have more bodies to distribute throughout the system. So we will be improving custodial care, reducing the number of square feet that each individual is responsible for across the system. We had a number of custodians who previously had to be held as floaters. And when a custodian was out, the floaters covered the missed position. We have changed the contract in collaboration with the Custodial Association to be able to bring in substitutes. So those floaters will now have regular assignments at an Adams or at a Jones, as well as the additions we're asking for at the high school. And again, I'll pull those out and highlight those for you in the square foot study.
Dr. Freeman, as we go through the book and come up with our questions, what's the best way for us to bring those forward, our questions and observations?
If you email those directly to me, and if you would CC both Mr. Bowden and Mrs. Trudeau, then we will work on having those answers for you when we sit down next. Obviously, during conversation, questions will come up, but if we have them in advance, I'll be able to avoid some of saying, I have that on a sheet of paper, but I didn't bring it tonight. The best way would be to email me so I can begin thinking about the answer, but CCing the people on whom I'm going to rely to provide the answer. But if you could do that between now and our next conversation, we will have as many of those prepared to answer in advance before sitting down with you, and I know others will pop up during conversation, and we'll pursue those then at the next round.
You can. Okay, good.
I would like to just ask one question that may be something that we get to later. But as I read through this over the weekend, I noticed when I looked at budget requests and then revised requests, there were a great number of decreases from or what I assume is originally requested to revised requested in textbook requests. And I know there's a move to go digital on a variety of things, and I know we have still outstanding textbook issues with math in middle school, but I'm just interested in understanding what I'm guessing school administrators were asking for that got reduced, in some cases significantly. As part of the budget, it's a very small piece.
Yes.
But in terms of their requests got cut a number of times, I'd just be interested in talking about that a little bit. I know over the years as a board member, I've heard concerns about the age of some of the textbooks our students are using. So in the context of those comments from various parents in the community and what I see here as reductions, I'd just be interested.
Sure. So I'll allow Dr. Keene to speak to that specifically. I can give you a broad answer to that now, and in fact, I'll start even a little more broadly than the question. I don't want to overemphasize this, but those lines are carried just to point out that this budget has already experienced reductions in excess of $1 million from what came in from the principals and the department heads. And their requests were reasonable to begin with. But we do want to be able to show the process. If we had simply compiled and forwarded all the requests, this building would be $1 million higher than it was. In the area of textbooks specifically, some of that is redundancy, where we may have had a book that was carried in a district line as well as in a building level line.
Okay.
So some of that was simply cleaning up and making sure that we weren't funding one request twice.
Okay.
Some of it is real reduction, and that has to do with making sure that we're making our decisions, again, thoughtfully and intentionally. Textbook requests have a process, and we want to make sure that we don't approve the monies for a new textbook for a course if that course hasn't made it far enough down the approval pipeline to be realistic for next year. So Dr. Keene has looked at every one of those requests. We can speak to them more specifically, but it's a combination of those two factors. Some of it is slowing down, not feeling ready to make that purchase this year, and wanting to pull together the committee, talk about how we are shaping that work, communicating that through the board now that we have a curriculum instruction and assessment committee, and some of it was just redundancy, but Dr. Keene will be able to speak to each one more specifically.
Okay.
On water, it goes up like 46%, and there's irrigation for Leet and Cox, but those are existing fields, right? What's the big increase?
Yes, in both of those areas, we are responsible for the water cost of irrigating town or park and rec fields, and that line is built year to year based on looking back over 2 or 3 past years and trying to take it. So we've had a particularly dry summer this year, which ran up the irrigation costs. So as we make sure that we've got enough to cover for next year, while those are town fields and while the town maintains those fields, we pick up the water cost. We have talked about meeting collaboratively with the town to talk about the whole shared system. Guilford is unusual and much more collaborative in how school grounds and town grounds are maintained and paid for. But this is an example where we didn't choose to change the irrigation cycle, but we're responsible for the cost of the changed irrigation cycle. I get that accurate?
I believe Cox is, they're adding another field to Cox as well.
So thank you. So part of it was the change in irrigation cycle at Leet, but the Cox is an expansion. Thank you. So there's more space as well.
I'm not sure exactly. I was told that they were adding a field
I'll come back
to
to more
Cox.
detail.
Okay.
It's irrigation.
Okay. Other questions or thoughts tonight? Just check your emails as the week rolls on. We've got a meeting scheduled Thursday with the principals, and there's some thought about trying to reschedule that because of some conflicts and some scheduling issues. And what we may do is combine that meeting with the workshop meetings. And then I think we would like, I've talked to several of you about trying to do the second workshop meeting to also specifically have an agenda item to review the International Baccalaureate program with Mr. Messeni. So since he's going to be there anyway, maybe we'll just try to combine some of these things and do it a little more efficiently. Obviously, there are no expensive programs that you're talking about in this proposed budget, so I think there's not a high likelihood that we're going to be spending a lot of time on some of the issues that we have in the past. So we may not meet on Thursday. Any member of the public that's thinking about going to that meeting, check the website because we may reschedule that in due course. So, okay, any other questions or comments for tonight? How many people are able to make the Board of Finance meeting next Tuesday, the committee meeting, or who's planning to attend? All right, so fair number. All right. We may want to do a little workshop after that, maybe, too.
That's another opportunity to stay and talk. They, I believe, go directly into their regular meeting.
Right.
Yeah, well, we could notice it as a special meeting for us and just chat for a little while, if that would be productive. So why don't we explore that and
Great.
see what's
Good idea.
That's another good idea.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you one question? I know the Dr. Borland results are just a receive item, but you can add this to the list of information for the next time. But one of the comments that I found interesting was some things at Baldwin and talking about the large amount of music options that are available to fifth graders and how that cuts into scheduling time that could be used towards the 60 to 75 minutes of math, and the concept of having perhaps an advanced track of math starting in fifth grade. So I would be curious to hear what that might cost us if.
Yeah, so I want Dr. Borland to speak to that as well, but I'm fully prepared to actually answer both of those. The first one is something that I will recommend to this board move. You know, when the Futures Report came back, what I did is I took the recommendations and I tried to chunk them into immediate, short-term, and long-term responses. When Dr. Borland talks about looking at Baldwin and changing a schedule, that's a medium to long-term response. So I would not suggest that we can receive a report in December and ask Mr. Hamill to have a new schedule up and ready for his school by September. So that is something that we'll need to begin looking at, but it wouldn't impact this budget. If it was to have a budgetary impact, it would be a year out. As a matter of fact, when I began pulling together focus groups to talk about the next principal for Baldwin Middle School, one of the comments I heard more than anything else from parents and from faculty members was to take a look at the schedule and look at the Baldwin scheduling. So that's something that Mr. Hamill's already been thinking about. The second component has already slipped my mind. It was the math.
It was the concept that music was, the kids could take 3 musics and that was the scheduling, or that's what he saw as the scheduling.
Yes, he made the observation that math contact time at Baldwin is comparatively low, while musical contact time at Baldwin is comparatively high. That's accurate, but that's not the end of that conversation. There's a lot of community values that are intertwined in those two statements and not necessarily a one-to-one correlation. So that's exactly why that conversation needs to go further. The second piece was he made a recommendation about looking at math grouping at Baldwin. So he also talked about looking at math grouping at Adams and through to the high school. We have already started looking at the math track. Now that's a document that I think all of you are familiar with. It is an area that we asked Dr. Borland to focus on. We were already beginning to talk and do work around the math opportunities, but waiting for his report. So when Dr. Borland comes to meet with you in February, we'll be fully prepared to talk about what short and long-term responses to that might look like.
What a date for that visit?
He is scheduled to be here for your workshop meeting in February. So that would be the second meeting in February that we're expecting Dr. Borland to be here. That's a public meeting. The community is welcome to attend. and he will be presenting his report formally to all of you. You received.
Instruction committee, does that meet before that meeting? That's opposite policy.
Yeah.
I think,
Curriculum meeting.
I can answer that quickly.
Curriculum is that one?
That one, it's the 23rd, Chris.
So actually it pairs together to be a really rich conversation that evening.
We may be able to even start it early. depending on when you can get here.
Are we saying February 23rd?
If that's your workshop meeting?
No, it's the policy committee meets at 6 before the 23rd.
Okay.
So it's a different.
Still a really good conversation.
No.
Because perhaps I'm the only one who feels this way, perhaps not, but I understand, I know that when we entered into the contract with Dr. Borland, there was no guarantees that we were going to either do anything or, but I just want to keep the options open, that if there are things that we can do, it's sort of a nice way to show parents that, hey, we did this study, we got some really good feedback, this is what we could do.
I can assure you that I see examples of immediate, medium, and long-term responses that we will be responding to. There is lots of good suggestions, recommendations, ideas, and thinking that he shared with us, some of which we might have been thinking on our own, but he encouraged, and some of which is challenging, and we're looking forward to embracing. Dr. Borland's report is going to impact what we do, just as the Futures report impacted what we do.
I think there's a high likelihood, and I mean speaking for myself anyway, without speaking for you or the rest of the board, I think there's a high likelihood that a substantial number of these recommendations are going to be put into place this year or for next school year. A high likelihood.
You could look through it and recognize what appears to be low-hanging fruit, and those are things that we start on immediately. Things that might have significant preparation time, financial impact, hiring implications, those you plan for and move off into that short or that long-term bucket. But none of it means you're not moving forward on all of it. But I think there'll be changes in place by September. They will be, by definition, low-hanging fruit, but there will be changes in place, I would suggest, by the September. A number of his recommendations, in fact, tell us not to do things differently, which is encouraging. There were things that encouraged us to keep doing what you're doing, but do it a little better. And then there were other places where he actually gave us contradictory recommendations. He said, you need to do something different, and I'm going to give you 3 recommendations. You can't do all 3 of them. You're going to have to think your way through this. I was impressed by the way that he provided the feedback.
So why don't we just, since we're wildly out of order on the agenda, why don't we just why don't we just go to this now? Why don't we go to 10.3, which is to receive the report. We all received it, I think, on Friday or thereabouts. It is going to be put on the district's website
this week. It'll be made available to the public this week.
Okay. If anybody can't live until it's put up on the website, send me an email. I'll send it out to you tonight or tomorrow or whatever you want. I will. It's a public document, and I don't think there's any reason that it shouldn't be distributed fully. So shoot me an email. I will send it to you. Depending on when we get out of this meeting, maybe not tonight, maybe in the morning, but within 12 hours, let's say. You know, I think when you describe there is low-hanging fruit, I would phrase it slightly differently. There are recommendations that he makes that I think are tangible and will lead to positive results that are not particularly hard to implement and not expensive to implement. Just because it's low-hanging fruit doesn't mean it's not a significant item, and I was encouraged by it, frankly. I think there were some really good ideas in it, and I think there were, you know, we're going to have a much longer discussion about it. The reason that we did it was to identify things that we can do better to try to meet the needs of high-achieving students, and you know we got what we bargained for. We got an objective outside look that I think has a lot of great insight. So.
And it's worth noting that, I mean, the objective outside look doesn't give you just a 6-month window to make change. We're still drawing from the Futures report 3 years out from the Futures report. So this list of recommendations can help to shape our work for multiple years moving forward. We want to be careful about not trying to do all of it right away. We won't do all of it well if we try to do all of it right away. But I agree completely with Mr. Bloss. Some of the highest impact things I would identify in that first category.
And do folks want to talk about this any more this evening, or what do we? What's your pleasure?
I think we should wait until we have
him here, and, you know, we can have more of a substantive discussion.
Yeah, I agree, and I'd prefer not to start interpreting his report until he has a chance to speak to his report. I'll interpret it for the next 2 or 3 years. I'd love for Dr. Borland to have the first word with you, despite the fact that I've already talked about it.
And now, you know, the one caveat being that just because we're not going to discuss this fully as a board at the end of February doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about how you're going to implement some of these between now and then. You know, we don't want to be in a position, and now it's the end of March, and well, now it's getting close to the end of the school year, and we've got a new high school coming on, and so let's assume that the board accepts the merit of the large majority of these recommendations, and think about how we're going to try to implement them in a meaningful, thoughtful way.
We're working on that evaluation now.
Has this been posted to the website yet?
No, it was distributed to you first. It will be distributed to the website this week, if not tomorrow, early this week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Overall, I mean, I was pretty impressed with, you know, the detail and the balance and the thoroughness that he went through and did it.
I was impressed with how readable it was. It was obviously, this guy's obviously a teacher, right? You know, that his writing is very good. It's clear.
Yep.
But anyway, anybody here who wants a copy, just shoot me an email. I'll send it to you by tomorrow morning. Okay. Any other discussion about that now? Have we paid him, by the way? Is he done in terms of his invoice?
He has submitted an invoice. I'm not sure if we've released payment at this time, but I know that he has submitted a bill.
We don't owe him anything. And
We will pay him.
Okay. No, I'm sure we will. No, you did a good job. Okay. 9.2, let's go back to that, update on school start times. That was the most fascinating meeting that I've been involved in years.
This is the much shorter portion of my report. I believe we had approximately 100 interested parties who showed last week to participate in that conversation. I received a number of compliments for Craig Campanari and Craig Mullet, who presented the research in the beginning, and I have to say that one of the best decisions I've made since being here was not making that presentation myself. They were accessible, they were brief, they did a fantastic job getting it out on the table, and I found the conversation fascinating. I think the conversation only helped to illustrate the level of interest in the topic and the complexity of the topic. I think the analogy of the Rubik's Cube, if we commit to doing this, we know that every little move we make will move 4 or 5 other components of our program. I began working the next morning on a proposed timeline. One of the last questions from one of the parents in the audience was, what do you see doing next? And I believe I listed 6 or 7 steps that I think we need to take next to do this well. My only recommendation for the board, and I think I spoke to it in closing without saying it this clearly as a recommendation to the board, is that, again, we work on this thoughtfully and intentionally. I don't think that we can do this well and have something in place that we roll out for this September and be fair to the people who will be impacted by the magnitude of the change. That's not to say that we don't begin working on it immediately. I would like this board to direct me to begin or continue to work on this immediately, to begin to meet with members of this board and bargaining units, to talk to employees who will be affected, to task the bus company with taking a couple of those scenarios to completion, to having further community conversations, to looking further at it. And I think that if this board makes a decision about that change about this time next year and leaves us half a year to advertise and communicate that decision clearly, that would be a healthy timeline. I think we could move faster than that, but I think that we would limit the number of options that we can explore, and I think that we would end up going smaller rather than exploring all of our options if we looked at it more thoroughly.
Well, I think it's early days on that. It may be that there's something we can do that could be implemented by next year if we don't go real big on this. I mean, maybe the way to look at this is to take it in pieces. Let's think about that. One area that was discussed in the meeting and I am still interested in learning more about is the idea of how efficient our bus runs are. And I mean, I just wonder, are we using all the technology that's available today to optimize this program? I mean, there really are some very interesting computer-assisted programs that help optimize resources in a moving transportation type situation. And I mean, I know in a company where I'm a director, we saw over a 20% increase in efficiency when we went to computer programmed as opposed to manual on some of this stuff. I mean, have we gone to that level of granularity to...
Before you answer that, we need to change the tape. We're 2 hours in.
Okay. Okay.